was a point top years in the United States Marine Corps Infantry, and then I came back and I went to UNLV, got my degree at UNLV. I joined Metro in the year 2000, so this is my 22nd year serving this community, and it's a true honor of serving this community. So, and then after that, I got 2 graduate degrees. I got my MBA and a Master's in Management, and then I promoted throughout the ranks, and I've had several assignments, but by far being part of the Traffic Bureau and influencing the traffic safety of this community has been probably one of the most important positions I've held in this in my career with Las Vegas Metro. So let's get to it. Let's talk about impaired driving. Last year, we were able to reduce impaired driving fatalities, impaired driving related fatalities by almost 54%. So that actually increased our ability to save lives, because that's what it's all about. It's about saving lives. And so what did we do about that? What we did is we started increasing our DUI blitzes. And you ask, what is a DUI blitz? So a DUI blitz is a collaborative effort between all the jurisdictions within Clark County. Metro and NHP have the DUI strike team. And the DUI strike team is a collaborative effort as they come together to go out and identify, detect, and locate and apprehend impaired drivers. And so during our DUI blitz, we put about 50 to 60 officers, and that is their sole purpose in life, is to find the impaired driver, remove that driver off the roadway, arrest them before they hurt somebody. And so like I said last year, we increased our DUI blitzes from quarterly to every month. And then during the holiday season, starting in October, we increased it to twice a month. So we did about 15 to 16 DUI blitzes last year. We made 381 impaired driving arrests, DUI arrests, and then we also made over 1,000 stops and then citations, about enforcement rate, about 500 or 600 citations for that during those DUI blitzes. Another thing that we did last year is we increased our 7-day coverage and make sure that the DUI strike team, again, a collaborative effort between NHP and Las Vegas Metro, and that we had 7-day coverage. And so we had squads that their sole purpose was to go out there and arrest the impaired driver. And so that really worked out for us. Now the DUI strike team, they're approaching about 2,700 arrests since they started for over about 2 years ago. And so they really have truly had an impact out there with the impaired driver. And so that's another thing we've done. Other thing that we've done is with patrol. Now with patrol, there's several area commands. Some are more impacted than others, reference impaired driving. And so we decided to put on advanced training for patrol and try to give them the ability to identify, detect, and locate impaired drivers more frequently. And also made it more relevant with them and gave them more confidence. So right now we're actually seeing an increase in DUI arrests for this year in 2021. So we're encouraged by that and we're excited. And that hopefully that's also going to translate into saving lives, because that's what it's all about, is saving lives and increasing the community membership and having an opportunity to truly, because it's tragic stories. Every week, every month, we have tragic stories that come up when it comes to fatalities. So another thing that we're going to do starting this quarter is we're actually working with the city and the county to identify the citizens of this community that have DUI warrants. So this is your warning right now. If you have a DUI warrant, please get that warrant squashed, get that off the books, get rid of that warrant, because I have approximately 15 apprehension teams available to me that are going to go out and start knocking on doors, and we're going to start arresting people with DUI warrants. And that hopefully in that opportunity will actually increase our ability to make a difference out there. And that's the key all day long. So the last thing I really want to talk about is AB 10. And AB 10 is the new legislation that is being proposed, and it's actually increasing the vehicular manslaughter charge from misdemeanor to gross misdemeanor. So what does that mean? So as a misdemeanor, you can actually get imprisonment for 6 months and a $1,000 fine. Change it to a gross misdemeanor will actually increase it from almost a year in prison and $2,000 worth of fine. And the key term in the narrative of the Nevada revised statute is a simple negligence when it comes to vehicular manslaughter. Simple negligence. So it's key that, again, please drive safely out there. And when it comes to impaired driving, do not drink and drive. It's absolutely important that we do not drink and drive. So let's talk about speeding. All right, so speeding, there's challenges with speeding. And the reason why we see this fatalities is because a lot of our roadways are speed supportive roadways. And like roadways like Fort Apache, Durango, Charleston, you name them, Rampart, they all have potentially a 45 mile per hour zone. So if you're traveling at 45 miles per hour, okay, there's a difference for your ability to stop your vehicle. There takes reactionary time and then the ability of the vehicle to stop after you decide that you need to push the brake. So the reactionary time usually is about a second and a half. All right, so if you're traveling 45 miles per hour, you'll actually travel 99 feet before you actually start pushing the brake at 45 miles per hour. Then add on another 97 feet for your vehicle, the average vehicle, to come to a complete stop. That's 196 feet when it comes to actually stopping your vehicle. The challenge with that is the average intersection in Las Vegas is 88 feet. So that's twice the size of an intersection. So if that person who is darting out into the roadway, or if you identify that you need to stop your vehicle, and if you're not paying attention and your reactionary time is slower than what it should be because you're not fully aware of what you're doing out there while you're driving, you'll actually increase that distance and it becomes dangerous. Now, we have a society that supports speeding. We know that, okay? And that's why I really push on my traffic officers, my motor officers, to get out there and enforce speeding as much as possible. So let's add on to the numbers right there. If we decide that you're going 60 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour zone, that actually increases your stopping ability of your vehicle with reaction and the vehicle to 304 feet. That is a football field to come to a stop. Now, why do I bring that up? The reason why I bring that up is because a lot of our roadways have curves. A lot of our roadways have the elevation changes, and those are blind spots. And sometimes when people are making those left turns right in front of that area where that blind spot might be coming, and if you're going 60, 80, 100 miles per hour, that becomes a great challenge for us. You know, and the reason why is because it takes that much time for you to stop. And so we've had several fatalities, even one just yesterday involving the motorcycle, where it was a simple left turn by an older gentleman who didn't see the motorcycle traveling at such a high rate of speed. And the motorcycle T-boned into the gentleman. And so we need to slow that down. We need to slow our speeding down, and that is really the main reason why speeding is a challenge for us. And it really gives us an opportunity. If we would slow down, then we would make a difference out there and an impact about reducing fatalities that we're talking about in traffic safety. So let's talk about distracted driving. We know that distracted driving is still an issue with teenagers. We can drive down the roadway and we can see people using their cell phones all the time. We make cell phone stops all the time. And so it's important that you reduce your ability of not being distracted while you're in the cabin, while you're driving your vehicle. And it's important because, again, we go back to the speeding, we go back to reactionary time. If you're looking down and you're taking that second or 2 seconds to read your message or to answer that call, and if there is a situation that you need to stop your vehicle before you collide, you're actually increasing the distance for your vehicle to be able to stop. And so it becomes a great challenge when you need to be able to stop your vehicle. So what are some tips reference distracted driving? Let's talk about that. So turn off your phone. That is one of the biggest tips that I can tell you. Before you start driving, just turn your phone off and just leave it to the side. Another thing you can do is just set your phone to give a message to anyone that texts you or decides to call you that, hey, I'm driving right now, I'll get back to you later. Another idea is that set up if you have passengers inside the vehicle, you can have them make the phone call, or pull over, park safely, and then make that phone call, and that will help you out there too. Use your passengers the most you can, especially if you need a text or make a phone call. That's another tip that you can actually do. Or another thing that really is a big deal about distracting driving is your pets. Your pets are running around the cabin and everything else, and actually your full focus about driving is not there. So it's important to secure your pets, make sure they're not distracting you from being fully aware of what you're doing out there on the roadway. It's very important. And then keep the kids safe inside the car. Sometimes we're still seeing kids unsecure inside the car while you're traveling. So make sure that they're buckled in, they're in the car seats properly, and that they're secure, and so you're not distracted by them either, and that they're in the safest position possible to survive a wreck if should it happen. It's important on that. And the last thing I want to talk about on distracted driving is red lights still count. So if you're stopped at a red light and you're waiting for the light to turn green, you cannot use your cell phone at that moment. It clarifies, it says it's hands-free. It has to be hands-free. And so it's important that you understand that. If you need to use your cell phone, if you need to get mapping or directions or anything done, then pull over, safely park, or do that stuff before you start driving, so it helps out with the reducing distracted driving. Now let's move on to pedestrian safety. Last year, we had 40 fatalities that involved pedestrians. Out of those 40 fatalities, 27 of those fatalities were the error of the pedestrian. The pedestrian was at fault. Why? Because simple is jaywalking. Usually it happens at the, again, in the middle of the roadway, and they're not going all the way to the intersection where the crosswalks are, or they're at the crosswalks and they're not listening, they're not paying attention to the traffic control devices, stuff like that, or they're not waiting because they're impatient. It's imperative that you actually don't jaywalk, you use the crosswalks appropriately, and you cross safely when you're allowed to do so. 27, again, out of 40 were the error of the pedestrian. Already for 2021, we've had several involving pedestrians on Charleston, Maryland Parkway, Boulder Highway. These are all roadways that have traditionally been a problem for pedestrians, and they're working on it, but you need to do your part out there and make sure that you cross safely. So let's talk about some tips reference pedestrian safety. All right, so when you're coming up and you're at that crosswalk and you're at that intersection, you're waiting to cross, and you see that vehicle coming, make eye contact with that vehicle driver and acknowledge each other. All right, so when you see that, you can actually cross safely once they acknowledge and you see that vehicle come to a complete stop. Another thing is, do not run or dart into the roadway. And the reason why I bring that up is we've had several where they were darting in and out of traffic, and by the time they get to the nearest lane or wherever the case might be, that vehicle and that driver did not see that person darting across at a full sprint, and they get hit and killed. It's a very tragic story, which happens frequently, unfortunately. We just had a fatal where the pedestrian was starting to go across the street and darting across, and another pedestrian said, "Don't do that. Don't do that. It is unsafe." And that pedestrian, unfortunately, the victim in that scenario, actually ignored the other pedestrian's advice. And so again, there's those opportunities where you go to the crosswalks, use the intersections, and cross safely when it comes to. Think about holding hands. So the young children out there and the parents, I'm really talking to the parents right now. Please hold the hands of your children. All right, and the reason why is because certain things might distract those children, and then they might want to dart out into the roadway. And please hold their hands when there's a lot of traffic involved. And there's some roadways, again, the sidewalks are right next. Or you might be traveling down a roadway where there's actually vehicles parked on next to the sidewalk, and it creates a blind spot for drivers as they're driving along the parked vehicles. And so if the kids dart in between the vehicles, there's no way that driver can see that kid coming. And that becomes a challenge there. And then obey the traffic control devices. Unfortunately, we've had scenarios where they were actually in the crosswalk, but they didn't obey the traffic control device. They decided just to cross right away, and the people driving, making a left turn, they couldn't see them because of the A-frame of their vehicle, and they were impacted, and they were transported and passed away at the hospital. We had a couple of those too last year, and it's really, again, I sound like a broken record, but it's tragic. It's a very sad story when it comes to our community members. And then finally, cross safely. We had a scenario, other situations where they had a hoodie on, they were buried in their phone, and they decided just to start walking. And then when they started walking, the drivers didn't see them, and they were impacted. So be aware. As a pedestrian, be aware of your surroundings. Make acknowledgement. Be cautious around other vehicles as you're driving, because it's your life. It really is important, and I can't emphasize it more. And then as drivers, know this. Drivers, when you're coming up and you see a heavily populated pedestrian area, or if you see children involved, then please slow down. Take your foot off the brake or off the pedal and go onto the brake, and understand that. Prepare yourself. Expect the unexpected, because you never know when that person's going to dart across, or wherever the case might be. If you just slow down, that gives you that opportunity that actually puts your vehicle in a position to actually, it can brake a lot faster instead of going from pedal to brake. So it's imperative that you expect the unexpected. And so it's, again, pedestrian safety is absolutely critical. Right now, the Office of Traffic Safety, they're declaring 2020 is probably one of the worst years ever in fatalities. And the reason why is because in state of Nevada, it looks like that Las Vegas Metro was the only jurisdiction that reduced their fatalities. Every other jurisdiction actually increased in fatalities, and that's frustrating. And so it's imperative that we look at these things. We talked about impaired driving, we talked about pedestrian safety, and we talked about the elements of speeding and the reason why you really shouldn't speed, because it just means pretty much lives are on the line when it comes down to it. So some educational opportunities, I just want to say that if you go to our website, our Facebook website on LVMPD traffic, especially parents that have young drivers, teenage drivers, go on there and look at it. Connect yourself there, because what we do is we put up the pictures from the fatalities. It's always a great discussion with your kids, to say, hey, it's important that you don't drink and drive, that you're always aware, that you put your devices down, that you're not distracted, you're not speeding. It's important with that stuff. And if you go to LVMPD traffic, that gives you that opportunity. A lot of what I discussed today is on zerofataliesnv.com. Now, that is the website for the Office of Traffic Safety, and there's a lot of resources on there that any parent can go on there and take a look at it and learn from. They talk about speeding, they talk about impaired driving, they talk about the 6 elements that lead up to fatalities. They've done all the research. They identify certain characteristics that are people that are usually involved in fatality accidents. And so if you fall in that characteristic, you might want to see, check yourself and understand that, hey, I need to change my driving behavior. Because that's what it's all about. It's about changing driving behavior. That's the question that we try to ask every day in the Traffic Bureau. How can I add value into saving lives to make it important? What I just did, we just had a motor school start off yesterday, and what I emphasized to them is that every motor school now moving on, we are going to dedicate it to a fatality victim. And the reason why I did that is because I want to bring awareness, everyday awareness, to the young motor officers to understand that they're not out there just writing citations. They're not just out there trying to make arrests, but they're trying to make a difference to save lives, because that's what it's all about, and it's important. So another educational opportunity is there's apps out there that actually help you. Navigational apps are out there that can help you. They can tell you that you're speeding. They can tell you, make you aware of dangers in the roadway. they can actually tell you when we're in the area and we're actually doing enforcement. So those apps are out there. I would encourage you. I'm not going to mention any particular ones, but that's another educational opportunity for you to become a better driver to help change your behavior in driving. Now, I want to touch on school zones real quick. A lot of questions come up about school zones and how how the lights are still going. And so again, there's kids that are coming on their bikes, they're walking to school, and they're picking up their meals and their food and stuff like that, and they're going back home to do the virtual learning. So that is one reason. The other thing is there's sometimes parents' conferences going on. There's teachers that are coming and going from the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And it's important that we obey those laws when those lights are on, especially when the children are out there. It's imperative that. Now, on top of that, the younger grades of kindergarten through third grade are actually going back to school in the beginning of March. So be very aware of that there's going to be more children out there on the roadways, and especially around the elementary schools. So please do your part and drive safe and increase the safety of our community through traffic safety. And that's what we're talking about today. So I'm grateful to be here with you today. I covered a lot of stuff relatively quickly because I want to get to the questioning. And again, I've served this community for over, this is my 22nd year of being a police officer, and it's been a true honor because this is my community. I was born and raised here too. So on that note, I'll take some questions.
Captain Bledsoe, you mentioned the holidays. The Super Bowl is coming up. Is there any special preparations or enforcement that's going to be happening then?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Super Bowl weekend on that Sunday, we actually have a DUI blitz going, and we're going to have somewhere around 60 to 70 officers, about 40 to 50 traffic officers, and then we got a bunch of patrol squads that are going to help us. NHP is going to be out there. Other jurisdictions are going to be out there. And from a certain period of time throughout the evening, we're going to be valley-wide, and we're going to be doing DUI enforcement throughout the valley. So please, use your designated drivers, use Uber, use Lyft, do whatever you got to do, because you got to remember, a DUI arrest is about $10,000 to $15,000 for every DUI arrest, besides all the criminal history that you obtain and everything else. To use your Uber and Lyft, or actually a designated driver, is somewhere between $15 and $25. So I want you to have a great Sunday. I want to have a safe Sunday, a Super Bowl weekend. And please, please do not drink and drive. And during that time, that's what we're doing. We're doing a DUI blitz on that Sunday.
There's a lot of state tags, a lot of unregistered vehicles. Is there any special attention given to those vehicles?
So we're waiting for DMV to move forward on that, and we're still at that point where it comes to COVID. And so we're not enforcing those areas. However, we're looking for other infractions to enforce if you're out there, especially the main focus is speeding, impaired driving, and then distracted driving, of course, too.
What should people do if they see reckless driving or if they have people doing burnouts in their neighborhoods?
They should call us. And the reason why is because that is a very unsafe situation. That's another great question. So we have those speeders that are over there taking over the intersections. Please call us, and we'll send out the nearest patrol officers. We'll get the traffic officers going over there, and we'll try to slow that down and remove that element, because it is a form of dangerous driving out there, because they are speeding, they are taking over the intersections, and we really need to stop that. If you do see a reckless driver, we call it 410 on there. If you see a reckless driver, please call us, because that might give us an opportunity to either catch them in the process, or we follow up later. We actually have a reckless driving project that we do, where if your plate is actually called in, we actually follow up and we do knocks at doors. And if it tends to be a teenage driver, then we talk to the parents. If it tends to be somewhere at young adults, then we talk to them. And depending on the situation, that's how we'll move forward on that. But we do have a reckless driving project that we do actively as Las Vegas Metro.
Recently, south of Boulder City, there was a terrible fatal collision with a vehicle and bicyclists. Could you just talk a little bit about that, and also share the road?
Yeah, share the road is important. Remember, when you see the bicyclist on the roadway, you're supposed to move over and give them that buffer zone. That's a safety zone, and that's about 3 to 5 feet. So the important thing about that, and It's an absolute tragedy that all those bicyclists passed away, and those are members of our community, and it's affected us all. It's as simple as that. It truly has affected us all because it's a very sad situation. And these are friends and family members that are affected by this, and it impacted us all. That's all I can really say, reference that. But it's important that we share the road, and that really falls into distracted driving. That, again, be aware of your surroundings, be fully engaged in your driving habits, and that's critical. That's absolutely critical. And do not, and that kind of leads to another thing with reference to distracted driving, but driving while, while you're sleepy, while you're exhausted. Please don't do that, because that slows everything else down. I talk about the reaction time, the ability to stop, to maintain the lane. Those are all parts of commitment that you've chosen, because driving is a privilege. You got to understand that driving is a privilege, and is a collaborative effort of all the community together, working together to make sure that we all come home safely every night.
It's an old term, defensive driving. Just talk about the importance of that, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, so defensive driving is, again, you're there, you're fully engaged. You're making sure that you're not distracted. You got your cell phone off. You're not speeding. You're not impaired. These are all elements of defensive driving. You're expecting the unexpected. You're anticipating. Some people might cut you off, whatever the case might be, but you are engaged, and you're trying to make sure that you're driving appropriately for the situation. And that's the key. Really becomes the key of the of the scenario while you're out there every day. Be fully engaged in what you have to do. All right, this is outstanding. I really appreciate the questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this today. I can't emphasize it more. I tend to have to go out to pretty much every fatal, and it is quite difficult. It's just quite difficult to see the heartache in the family members and the friends, and they really ask that question, how did this happen? But unfortunately, we need a cultural change. We truly need a cultural change, because we drive under the impression that we're okay to drive. We always say that, hey, I'm okay to drive. Or we say, hey, nothing ever will happen to me. Or stuff like that. And it is true that bad things do happen to good people. And that's what the heart of traffic safety